I'm Mike Emmerich. I'm founding director of Metro Dynamics, which is a consultancy that works with cities and other places trying to get strong cities, devolution and growth. So my argument is that the current devolution process, though far from perfect, is about the best chance I've ever seen for getting real power back into cities and into other areas. I'll be arguing that we should not let the best be the enemy of the good by saying that we need to have long-term deliberative processes before getting on with this devolution process. Rather, that we get on with doing it now, we get some real powers into these new devolved areas, get some things really at stake that make a difference, like running the buses, running the skills system, running welfare to work. And then once we've got something to really work with in cities, then I think we can have a more meaningful debate rather than the hypothetical debate, which is all about stuff that we're probably never going to get anyway, unless we get on with taking the offer that's there from government.
So I was one of the people who wrote the Manchester deal, and I'm trying to negotiate some others. But I've also been a senior civil servant in Treasury and in Downing Street, but I still live and work largely in Manchester. And I wanted to come and talk to you today because I agree with a lot of what I've heard, but in the end, I think you've got a choice as a city and as a region, which is, are you going to go for this? Are you going to embrace this devolution deal, or are you going to argue about the finer points of it? And I'm saying, look, let's just get on with it and make it work, and let's not let the best be the enemy of the good. And I want to say that for a few reasons. Firstly, when I finished here, I've got to go down to London. I've got to see a friend in hospital and have dinner with my daughter in London. When I arrive in London, this time, as every other time, I'll feel like I'm arriving in a different country. To a greater extent than ever in our lives, that 200 miles south of here takes you to a place of untold riches, poverty as well, that feels like a different place. And if we let that carry on, our country's going to fall apart. And so my question to you is the kind of devolution in these deals the best chance there is of trying to get the northern cities, the big northern councils, the big places like Sheffield, Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle and the others, to get some power and to start to turn the tide back? Well, I think it is. We've heard a lot about how it's disorganised and a bit ramshackle the way the government's doing these things, and I'm not going to argue with that, but I'll give you some really good counter-arguments in a minute as to why you shouldn't obsess about that. But here's the big thing. Throughout my working lifetime, and actually back to when I was a kid at school, through the establishment of the 1974 Met District Councils and County Councils, the Redcliffe Moor Commission and everything that preceded it, with the Thatcher government and her attempts at trying to change local government, with Labour reforms, the attempt to create regional assemblies, they were all very, very planned. They were done in a very much more constitutional way. Certainly the 1974 creations were, and the Prescott regional assemblies were, and they were a nightmare. They didn't work. No one wanted regional assemblies. They were voted down 9-1. Because strangely enough, even if they're a good idea, and actually I think it would have been a good idea for the North East, the people who come out and vote very often are the people who are against, and the people who will benefit from it stay at home because democracy doesn't work very well. So we had planned attempts, and if this is a bit ramshackle, it is as I think it was Nigel said, or sorry, Andy said, it is in the traditions of a freewheeling kind of way we do policy in this country, which is of negotiating. So let's get on with it. The moment's right is my third point. It's right because, you know, whereas 30 years ago when I started work, you'd look at Manchester or Sheffield and think its best days were behind it because we were going through the crises we all went through. You look at Manchester and Sheffield and Leeds and the other places, and we've come back. We've got very good leaders. We've made the cities feel like they've got a chance again. You've got to build on that. You've got to grow from that and take that moment. We've got a chancellor. You can love him, you can loathe him, you can take whatever view you want about him, but he's a Northern MP. He wants to devolve power. He doesn't like the London civil service, and he wants to empower the civic leaders that are from his tradition of Toryism, which is actually, curiously enough, Gladstonian liberalism, which is of strong civic leaders building big things to make the country that we see around us that emerged in the Victorian age. But above all, he knows what we all know, which is that the civil service model we've got, the centralised state where the NHS is run from the centre, where you have no involvement whatsoever in the way the NHS works, when we almost fetishise hospitals as being this thing we must protect, whilst letting the social care that will stop people going into hospital wither on the vine. Well, let's have those decisions taken more locally through these sorts of devolution deals. Let's innovate new ideas, the sorts of ideas that William Beveridge saw in the 1940s when he was writing his report, which created the modern NHS. Let's see some innovation in cities, and I think that's what these deals offer. So two points to finish with. Yes, it is not an unprincipled process, but it was a manifesto commitment by government, however much you dislike it, that was legitimately elected. We've had democracy work on this in a very British tradition. Referenda are not a British tradition, and actually, given the referenda we've had, damn good too, because most of them end up taking decisions that are against the interests of the places because of the way who chooses to vote. And if you think Parliament's the answer, look at the desultory debate there was on the Cities and Devolution Bill in Parliament this week. You've had better discussions in here today than Parliament had last week, I'm telling you. You really, really have. And if you think it's all about citizens, let me just tell you something the organisers here won't want me to tell you. They wanted 60 people in this room, 45 people said they'd come, and 30 odd turned up. People aren't interested. If we do these devolution deals and we get a bit more power into the cities, into places like this, we'll have even more people wanting to come to meetings like this because there'll be something worth arguing for at stake in the room today. Because I think that's what matters. And as for money, there is money on the table. I'm afraid you are wrong. If John Mothersole and his colleagues don't do this deal, they lose £1 billion. Simple. The cuts are going to happen anyway. You know, there's going to be bloodbath in the spending review. Local government's going to get cut to shreds again, and I don't know how we're going to withstand it. But they would have walked away from £1 billion that wasn't on the table. They would have walked away from control of the adult skills system. They would have walked away from control of welfare to work. So I guess everything I'm saying is, this is not a perfect deal. But unlike the regional assemblies that John Prescott tried to create, that Ariana was talking about, this builds on things we know and understand called cities. We know what Sheffield is, we know what South Yorkshire is. People who live in North Notts and bits of Derbyshire know what your travel to work area is. It allows everybody to participate in something that we know about. If you get this devolution deal through, you can put more stuff into it. But the question for you as you go away and think about it is, if you don't like this, what else is there on offer now? Let's build plans for the future that are very different. But in the here and now, this is the only offer that's on the table. And I think you'd be potty to turn it down. Thank you. There's a kind of language you use that I think is really important in a context like this, because I can't argue with a lot of what you've said. But you use the terms, there's a profound danger, there are profound consequences, absolutely right. But what decisions does anybody in this room ever make that aren't imperfect? We all make imperfect decisions. We make decisions all the time where there are profound consequences one way or the other. I think the academic tendency, and this is something that's less true of you, if I might say so, than a great many academics, is to put things in these stark terms, say, this is a profound change, and if we do this, there's profound implications everywhere. I think in the real world of policy and politics, people have got to just make a leap of faith, make a choice, and get on with it. But there are profound consequences for not doing this deal as well, which is you say goodbye to £1 billion, you say goodbye to control over the skills system. So let's get on and design something perfect, but in the meanwhile, get on with dealing with what's on the table. So I'm just trying to put some flesh on the bones of what Sharon's just said. I don't know what it's like here, but I know in one region of the country that's looking at re-regulation of the buses through a devolution deal, you had the bus operators making 20% margin on profitable routes while there were no rural routes. It's just not right. I'm afraid it's dead easy to say it's small. It's not. It's really big, because if you put that money back into the system, you get more buses. And there's two systems of running buses in this country. There's the London system, where the franchising means that the competition takes place in who gets to run the buses, or there's a competition everywhere else that happens on the streets, with profitable routes having lots of buses and not profitable routes having no buses. We're moving from having that system to the London system in everywhere that's got a devolution deal, and I think that's a really big thing to have. Secondly, at the minute, every FE college in this area gets its money because, broadly speaking, it's within 1% based on how much money it had for the things it did last year from central government. It's always been that way, and people like me have argued for 10 years to try and get a bit more traction, because we churn out loads and loads of hairdressers, loads and loads of car mechanics, virtually no software engineers, virtually no one working in the banking and finance system, and all the firms are crying out for labour. They're crying out for skilled labour. Well, unless you're a hairdresser or a car mechanic, you're no use to the kind of businesses that are hiring. What this deal means is that Shona and her colleagues working with businesses will be able to reconfigure what those colleges provide to make sure that kids who don't go to college and university can get the vocational skills to get the jobs that even in these difficult times the economy is still creating. So more buses for rural areas, more buses for the communities that aren't getting them, more kids getting the skills to get into work. Don't tell me it's not worth it.
I know you'll be brief because your train's revving up as it enters the station now.
So, thank you. The politicians have come in for a lot of stick today. I mean, I'd offer a thought to you, which is that in the end you get the politicians you deserve. and a lot of politicians are wrestling with the inconsistencies that we give them of wanting Scandinavian welfare systems with American taxes. And just remember that. And if you don't believe me and you don't like it, for about 500 votes on a wet Thursday night in May, you too could be there and you could change it. But for the politicians we've got now, I think the two questions about the 900 million and the George Osborne passed in his cuts are the same issue. There's about the politicians. If your politicians use that £900 million bill, you won't put it in little penny pots. You'll put it into some big things that will make a difference, and they can choose to do that. And then for George Osborne, is he passing down a negative legacy? Well, maybe. But I trust the people I vote for because I think they're good people, they're well advised. Processes like this can only add to that. And if that's right, then they'll take that money, they'll use it well, and they'll still argue that his cuts are wrong, and we'll all be the better off for it. So I think give the political system the support you need, the support it needs, the support that you can all bring it, and I think you'll find that it'll work rather better for you than perhaps some of the more cynical comments I've heard today would suggest.
Assembly member.